So let me just get rid of a couple controls and pop-up windows in front of me, and we'll get started. All right, so welcome everybody to our first in a series of CEU, Virtual CEU online courses provided by Waterworks for credit with AIA and ASID. Here are the course numbers. My name is Eric Rexrud, and I'll be your presenter today. Credits earned on completion of this course will be reported to AIA for those members who did give us their membership numbers, as well as to ASID for those members as well. Here is our outline for today, basically talking what we are going to look at. We are going to explore the different specification areas for the bathroom, that's what we call them, and sort of the options for each of those. So those will include your basic areas of the sink, toilet, bathtub, and shower enclosures. And we're going to look at the corresponding fixtures, which are items that hold water or more furniture type pieces, and fittings for delivering water. Here are our 4 objectives for today. So we're going to start by looking at the layout and uses of water delivery systems, and this is going to be for a typical residential building. Knowing that many of you are already familiar with this, but we hope by starting here that you might learn something new, and we might be able to clarify a few things on how water delivery systems work with plumbing, specifically in the bathroom of a house. Our second objective is going to be about the variations and options for each of the different fixtures in the bathroom. The third is understanding the different installation considerations, what may or may not give you a challenge, and what you should look out for that would especially apply to sinks, tubs, and toilets as you specify those items for the bathroom. And finally, understanding the many different types of fittings and how those supply water to those different areas of the bathroom and the considerations for those as well. So here are those 3 main focus areas, and I said 4 earlier, but we're really combining the bathtub and or shower area. We're talking about these areas because nowadays we find that standalone bathtubs are used much less often, and bathtub shower combinations are quite popular as well, especially for smaller spaces. So these are the 3 big areas we're going to focus on, and within these areas we're going to focus on the fixtures for each, which you'll see here in this beautiful layout of a bathroom. So our sink area, our tub area, behind that half wall, the shower area, and then of course, but it's not in this picture, is the toilet area. And we'll be exploring all the fittings that could possibly go there, as well as considerations for those. So within the bathroom, there are just an awesome amount of fittings and fixtures you can consider to use. Here are some typical ones that are fittings. Of course, you're going to have your faucets, anything to provide water to the tub, all of the many options that could go in the shower, not only the controls for the water, but the delivery methods such as shower heads and hand showers. And then of course some detail items like supply kits, drains, and P-traps, those sort of what we call finishing items to make sure there isn't any little ugly parts sticking out that we didn't consider. And then your fixtures, so those items that many people consider furniture or items that are installed and then they're permanently. So you have your sinks, and of course holding those would be vanities, washstands, maybe pedestal sinks. We're going to look deeply at bathtubs, at shower enclosures, and also at toilets. And one we won't look at today, but is another consideration, is bidets. So let's start, as I mentioned earlier, with understanding delivery systems, and we're going to look at the supply of hot and cold water to each fixture in the bathroom and how that gets to those areas and what we need to remember. Also the use of shutoff valves and how we locate those and where they're best located, and then making sure drainage and venting throughout the home is considered. So here is a diagram showing our hot and cold water supplies, drainage, and vents. And seeing this all together in a layout like this can be a bit daunting for those that are not familiar with it, especially your clients trying to understand how water systems works and why all of this may be needed. So here you'll see everything from our cold lines represented in blue to hot lines represented in the red. We want to remember that there are these vents, and the vents are there to allow for the venting of gases, but also to allow for the free flow of that sewer water, that used drainage water, into the septic system or the sewer system. Now, cold water is what is going to be supplied to the house. and that's going to be supplied either by your municipality, if you're in an area with city water, or by a well on your land. So that water that comes in cold is then going to be heated on the premises. And one thing you really want to consider about that hot water and how you're going to heat that is the capacity and whether you're going to use a tank or an instant type of hot water heater. And the reason we suggest this is because any items in the bathroom that may be affected by this, let's say a bathtub, can be influenced by what type of water heater you're going to use. So for example, if you choose a large, let's say 90-gallon bathtub, and you only have a 50-gallon hot water tank, well, that's certainly never going to fill the tub up for the user at a full hot capacity. So understanding the relationship between the hot water tank or the instant hot water, that's going to be a real consideration for the items in your bathroom. So we need to remember also that the water supply from the city or from your well and from the boiler is always going to be constant and always pressurized. So when you turn on a faucet, that is why the water flows easily, and pressure is key, especially for an area like a bathroom where a client expects performance. They don't want a shower head or a hand shower to just dribble out or have a very low water pressure. Pressure is key, and measuring that pressure with the plumber is also something that you should ask. A question that often gets asked of us is, what is a typical water pressure? What do you recommend? In our installation guidelines, we like to say that 40 to 60 psi, or pounds per square inch, is a good range and a highly operable range to work. Of course, you can have performance outside of those areas, but if you do have extremely high pressure, you may want to consider a pressure reducing system that your plumber can install so that you don't possibly blow out valves or joints or piping because of too much pressure. Or on the opposite end, if you have too low of pressure, you may want to consider a pressure booster so that that pressure can really get to an optimal performance area for the client. And as you see here on the right, we also want to consider shutoff valves. And shutoff valves are very important to us in the bathroom. And when we need to have an item serviced or when we want to just isolate one area, requiring shutoff valves is to stop the flow of water and allow that servicing to happen. Now, shutoff valves, typically when we see them in a basement or to an area, you'll see these two types here, either a gate type or a ball type. And these will allow the plumbing to be done in a specific room or even at an individual location. So having more than just one main shutoff valve in the house or where the water supply comes in is going to be essential. And planning out those valves and where you want to shut off water, especially if it is to just every bathroom in the home or to each individual bathroom in the home, is going to be a consideration. So here we see a diagram that illustrates the piping behind the walls. And what we're going to look at here is how the water is delivered and also where those shutoff valves are. So in this illustration here, you can see that we've located the shutoff valves below the floor level and making them accessible by a panel or opening below the floor level there so they can be used. So those supply lines will actually shut off for this entire bathroom if those are utilized. And then in this bathroom, you're going to see that the water is supplied through the valve and then up to the shower head to provide hot and cold water to the shower area. We're going to have a cold water supply that comes just up to the toilet. And then we're going to have hot and cold water that is supplied directly to the sink. Now, in the sink area and in the toilet area, it is very common to provide shutoff valves with the supply lines. And if you are using deck-mounted faucets, possibly in a vanity like you see on the right, or if you look at the left behind a pedestal sink, those shutoff valves are going to be very important to allow you to service two of the most commonly serviced areas of the bathroom, which will be the faucet or sink area and the toilet area. So let's look at some individual fixtures and how we can relate some of these items we just looked at or talked about to these individual fixtures. So with toilets or water closets or whatever you would like to call this item or area of the bathroom. This is one of those areas and one of those fixtures that has really changed dramatically over the last 30, 40 years, especially in the United States. If you have a pre-1980 toilet, maybe a vintage toilet in your bathroom, you could be using up to 7 gallons per flush. And with new standard toilets today, federal guidelines and code being 1.6 gallons per flush and WaterSense certified toilets using up to 1.28 gallons per flush, you can see there how much you could really save on water use and your water bill for the client by switching out a toilet or making sure that a toilet that you choose is going to be not only efficient, but also using great environmental standards. Another consideration with toilets is elongated versus round. Elongated has become about 90% of the option choice for consumers these days. The round choice is usually used if there are strict limits to the amount of area or knee space or space that one can sit on the toilet, and also where there may be a much more traditional or historic installation that a round toilet would be more appropriate. But we have really seen a move towards elongated toilets, and you can see here for the bullet points for really why this has happened and where you can see the trend going. And if you look at the seats that come on these toilets, or you can buy for the toilets, the standard lengths are pictured here, and you can see it is only a 2-inch difference between a round and elongated toilet. However, if you're in a tight space, that 2 inches can make quite a difference if you immediately have a wall right across from your toilet. We also want to think about the height of the toilet because you can buy toilets in different heights. Most of your toilets that are sold today are going to be ADA compliant and what is called comfort height. And these are ideal for people with back, leg, or joint problems, of course, taller people, and it does conform to ADA standards if that is required for your installations. So making sure that the toilet that you purchase is comfort height or ADA height is going to be more of a universal choice these days. Now, something that's come along in the toilet world quite recently over the last 10 to 15 years has been dual flush technology. And dual flush technology is, as I mentioned, quite new, but it is also something that is really still being learned by the user and the client. So the New York City Environmental Protection Bureau did a study on dual flush versus single flush toilets and if they actually do save water. And believe it or not, the data is actually inconclusive about this. One of the reasons for that is the learning curve. And although the homeowner or the client may learn to use the buttons and which button is for the smaller flush and which is for the larger flush quite easily, any visitors, if this is in a more public bathroom, maybe a powder room, might be confused and they hit one flush, they wish they had hit the other, and then they hit it too, and now you've used more water than you would have with just a standard toilet. So it is important that dual flush technology be explained to the client, and also that when you purchase dual flush technology, it's readily apparent to any user. We had the picture right before here where you can see a single drop of water versus a double drop of water, which would be, I would think, quite an obvious visual explanation of which button to push. A very important consideration when installing toilets, and especially when preparing the waste pipes for a floor mount toilet to sit on top of, is what is called the rough-in dimension. And this rough-in dimension is the measurement between the center of the hold-down bolts to the finished wall. And finished wall is the key phrase here. 12 inches is considered standard in what you will find with most options for toilets these days, but they can also be available in 10-inch and 14-inch rough-in dimensions. Now, one important consideration that's always good to reinforce here is that 12 inches is from the finished wall. If you can see the measuring tape that is here, it's showing it about 11 1/4 inches. And someone may think, oh my goodness, this toilet is not on the 12-inch center. We're going to have problems here if we ever need to replace this, or is it really lined up with my waste pipe below? And the problem here is we are measuring from a baseboard that's 3/4 inch thick. So this is from the finished wall, not any additional finishes where it may be a baseboard or other tile just on the bottom of the wall. All right, so let's move on to sinks, lavatories, or wash basins. So lots of options here, and this is where we get into quite a few different scenarios. So looking at the fixtures for sinks and wash basins and lavatories, we have one of the most popular choices here, which is an undermount. And an undermount bowl simply means that it's going to be mounted underneath of the countertop. It's going to be adhered with either silicone or clips, and preferably both. And it is going to be a nice option because it's very easy to keep the counter clean. You don't have any little areas that are going to cause some issues with dirt or grime over time. And it does provide a little bit more counter space. However, the second option within this type of specification of a sink would be to use a drop-in or an overmount. And two examples that you can see here. Both look quite nice. Maybe these are chosen for particular reasons or personal choice. You do have a little less counter space, but you do get a little bit more rim space if you actually wanted to have something set there on the rim of the porcelain instead of sitting something on the countertop, which may be made of stone, or another type of material that could possibly stain depending on what you're sitting there. Then we have wall-hung or mounted sinks. And the wall-hung or the mounted sink is something that's used for various reasons. You'll see a couple porcelain options here. There is a floating concrete option as well. But with all of these, you're going to definitely need to figure out your mounting and your supports. Oftentimes, you will need mounting brackets that will come out of the wall and need to be done during the framing and rough-in phase before the drywall goes up. If this is a remodel of a bathroom and you're just simply replacing a pedestal sink or another type of sink there, you need to seriously consider how this sink is not only going to be mounted to the wall, but be able to take the pressure of someone possibly pushing down on top of it, because you don't want this to work out to any type of instability or what I would just call wonkiness over time. Another popular sink option that tends to come and go through the decades are vessel sinks. And here you'll see three very pretty, simple vessel sinks. What you'll notice is one of them has an overflow hole, another one doesn't, and we're going to get into overflow holes momentarily. But three options here that will sit on top of the countertop, and that sink is going to mount directly on that countertop with the drain. And of course, pedestal sinks. Pedestal sinks are a very popular option, not only because of their price. They're usually one of the starting prices for a bathroom sink, so you can really get a lot of bang for your buck here. You can, on a bathroom, maybe a secondary bathroom that's under heavy budget consideration, look for a pedestal sink as an option. It also gives you some airiness below. But this pedestal sink is going to have holes already pre-drilled, so you will need to consider that, and we will look at that a little bit further when we get into the fittings for sinks. Now, one thing that is really important to consider and to think about with any of these sink options, especially if you're using a wash stand or something that is going to expose the piping below, is that you want to make sure your pipes and valves and supply kits that are under there are in the finish that you're specifying for the other items in the bathroom, and that they look attractive. You can see on the left there, none of us would want to see an exposed PVC pipe on the upper picture there. You have a beautiful bottle trap, a much modern version of the P-trap shown below. And what I can notice in this very pretty picture of a wash stand is that the neck off of the drain is in chrome, but the rest of my fittings in this bathroom are in a warmer tone of nickel. So making sure that you have all the right components and the right finishes on those parts is going to be much more visually appealing than trying to mix and match what may come with an item or may have been specified separately. So let's talk about that overflow. So the overflow drain or the overflow hole is really a plumbing feature that is there to prevent your sink from overflowing. And it's a safety measure that is very common, but not always required by code. Sometimes it is. And I would always err on the side of caution and try and choose a sink that does have an overflow hole, just so that you can be protected in the case of a clog or water left running. I personally, thinking I was a good novice plumber about 15 years ago, went out and bought a vanity sink combination for myself and installed it. And that sink did not have an overflow hole, yet my faucet that I bought did have an overflow that was included with the drain. So that was a conflict there that I needed to resolve and didn't even think of it or know of it at the time. But when I didn't have it resolved and I turned on that faucet, water went through the opening in my drain that was meant to line up to an overflow hole and went right down into the bottom of my cabinet. So something to really consider is having an overflow hole or not. Now, as I mentioned, by code, most places will require an overflow. So make sure you look for that and know your local code if that is required. Now, drain assemblies for bathroom faucets. Drain assemblies will always come with the faucet, and those drain assemblies will be evident when you look at them whether they have an overflow hole or not. As you can see in the lift and turn drain in the middle, there is a rectangular cutout in that drain, and that goes into the neck of the sink, and that will line up with the passageway coming down from the overflow so that any water that goes through the overflow comes down into the drain as well. But if you use that on a non-overflow sink, like I mentioned earlier, water could get down into the cabinet. The same is true of the reverse. If you look at the push-touch drain or the push-up drain on the right, that drain does not have an overflow hole. And if you use that type of drain with a sink that has an overflow, if water ever goes down through that overflow, it's going to have nowhere to escape and will eventually probably leak down into the cabinet as well. So making sure your sink overflow is the same specification as whatever faucet you choose, the drain that comes with that will be a little checkbox that you'll want to remember and consider when you specify both items. Now, many of us know the reason for the trap under the sink is really to prevent sewer gases from coming back up into the sink. That is why it is a trap, and it traps the water, and you can see here how the water is trapped. One important thing to consider when talking to your clients about how they're going to use the bathroom, especially if there are several bathrooms in the home and they may only use one or two of them primarily, or if this is a secondary or vacation home, that you really should have water running through all of your fittings and fixtures at least once every 2 to 4 weeks, because depending on the size and the depth of that trap, that is something that can evaporate over time, and then sewer gases will definitely come back up and create an odor in the bathroom that you don't want to have to deal with. So reminding clients that they should occasionally and regularly put water down the drains, turn on the taps, make sure that, that they've got that P-trap sealed. Now, speaking of traps, it is important to know that PVC is a common, quick choice, but many building codes do not allow it, and a lot of municipalities are not allowing PVC. So even in a cabinet where you may not choose a really finished look and items for P-traps and supply kits that are not budget conscious, please consider at least using metal everywhere, because that will protect you from a code you may not know exists in your locale. All right, let's look at bathtubs next. Bathtubs, one of my favorite topics. I think there's nothing more luxurious in a bathroom than a beautiful bathtub that also fits your body, feels great, and is easy to get in and out of. So bathtubs come in many, many different materials, and you'll see here a list of these, and we're going to go through a few of them. But one of the great options in design is the ability to choose from these different materials and choose aesthetics, sizes, finishes, textures that really represent the design and the intent that you and your client are trying to achieve. So my favorite bathtub is a cast iron bathtub, and cast iron bathtubs are one of the oldest forms of bathtubs, very, very traditional in many sense, but a cast iron bathtub doesn't have to be a strictly traditional look. We're seeing a lot of bathtubs these days in cast iron that are going more utilitarian or even more industrial looking, like the one you see there on the right with the riveted apron around the bottom. Now, cast iron bathtubs will have an enamel interior, and one of the things you want to really consider is the enamel that is being used. Many cast iron bathtubs these days use a zirconium enamel, and a zirconium enamel is quite fine and will last a long time, but it is the type of enamel that can wear over the ages, especially with a spout or a tub filler that is constantly dripping, and many of you have probably seen over the years that stained area right below the spout in the bottom of the bathtub, and that tells you that the enamel that was used was a zirconium enamel. The enamel we prefer and that you should look for in your bathtubs is a titanium enamel. Titanium enamel is a much harder enamel, a much purer white, and does not have that type of susceptibility to the minerals and things that are within water over time. Now, some of the challenges with cast iron tubs can be the weight that comes with them. Certainly, if you're installing a tub on the 3rd floor of a historic building that has no reinforcement in the floors, you may not want to consider an 800-pound cast iron bathtub, which will turn into possibly 1,200 to 1,600 pounds when water is filled. So considering the weight can be a challenge, and also, as I mentioned, the more traditional look that tends to be what cast iron bathtubs espouse. Now, another option with a metal tub is enamel on steel. Steel is a lower quality and a less expensive material than cast iron, made in a different way, but for budget bathrooms or for a bathtub where you may need a specific size or look, the enamel on steel can be an option. And a quick little aside, for those of you who really want to match some vitreous china, I inherited a home here when we moved to Philadelphia that had an avocado green bathroom in both the sink, the tub, and the toilet. Enamel on cast iron and enamel on steel can achieve this look for you. And I always hate to use the word match because they are two different materials that the enamel goes on, but they can get very, very close and be a good choice if you do have a client who wants to achieve that look of fixtures other than white. Now, the next category of tubs would be what is typically called a plastic tub. And I hate to use the word plastic, but truly that is what acrylic or resins or other materials that make up these tubs fall into, that big bucket of plastic. But the great thing about acrylic and fiberglass tubs is they are lightweight. They can be formed in almost any shape, size, interior, so they're very, very comfortable. These are materials that can be less expensive than cast iron tubs, and especially if they are backed with fiberglass or have a fiberglass in the materials, they can be an insulating tub. Many people ask about cast iron as an insulator, and it is an insulating tub once it heats up to the water temperature. However, plastic tubs or acrylic fiberglass tubs are definitely going to give you an insulating factor if they have a fiberglass coating or some type of insulation in the walls of the tub if we're looking at freestanding tubs here. I think the challenge with these type of tubs would be if a client uses abrasive cleaners or the ability for these to scratch a little easier than an enameled tub would. And then we also have the option out there for stone, wood, and other really unique materials that you see here. Now, something to consider with these materials, of course, with stone or other types of materials that are hard like that, the weight, the comfort, and how they are going to feel once the water has warmed up. Is that stone going to continue to draw the heat out of the water? And for wood, you can see some exquisite and just beautiful representations here of wood tubs. However, wood is not always waterproof, and so there is going to be some type of waterproofing finish or coating on these that you're going to need to make sure doesn't get scratched or penetrated so that you don't lose that water tightness over time. Now, with tubs, aside from the different materials and options you have, you do need to make sure you order the correct models and need to know what to look out for on specifying a tub. If you are using an apron tub, like you see in the left and center image here, you're going to need to specify whether that's going to be a left or right facing drain, because these tubs have the apron on only one side of them and are usually meant for an alcove area. Now, if you're using a drop-in or undermount tub, that's a standard rectangular type that you see here, then those can be reversed and do not need to have a specification or left or right. Now, some bathtubs, like you saw with those two apron front tubs, and you see here in these two pictures, come with a tile flange. And a tile flange is going to be immensely important for you if the tub is going against a wall, and especially if this is a tub-shower combination. So if you're using it against a wall, that tile flange is included in tubs that are meant to be used against a wall, such as you'll see that copper tub that has this integrated flange on all three sides. However, the tub on the right has a tile flange on the back, but I don't see one on the right. So that backer board may have been installed over it, or this may have been a tub that only came with the flange on the back. And it's important to know this because your tile is going to sit over the flange, so as the water runs off the tile, it's not running down on top of the tub, it's or on top of where the tub meets the backer board. It's running over that and can easily drain, and you don't have any worry of water getting back into the walls over years and years, which again, to my own bathroom, happened about 15 years ago as I inherited this bathroom from the 70s that was avocado green, and the tiles started coming off the wall in the bathtub shower area. I noticed that this was a tub that didn't have a tile flange on it, and it was installed incorrectly. Now, another big question is always about non-slip or anti-skid bottoms. They are built in on a lot of tubs, and on many tubs, they may be available as a special order as a different option. So you can see here a typical example of an acrylic and a cast iron bathtub that has obviously been used, and you can see how those can take on staining over time if they aren't cleaned regularly. The thing to remember about anti-skid or non-slip bottoms is that on cast iron, if you are using a cast iron tub as a tub-shower combination, these are most likely going to be required by code. So you do want to check if anti-skid bottoms are going to be required for a cast iron tub in a tub-shower combination. Acrylic tubs technically do not need a non-skid bottom because acrylic is listed as a non-skid material for this application. However, it is a good consideration if you have a client that may be concerned about stepping in the tub, may be older, may have a little bit of balance issues, or just want some extra traction under their feet. Always a good option, and I would definitely order the tub with this installed rather than putting those pretty little adhesive types on afterwards. Now, another consideration of tubs, especially I think with freestanding tubs, as you see there in the left, is being aware of the tub height. One of the things will be your overall height, which is going to give you an idea of how easy it will be to get in and out of the tub. If it is a taller tub, do you have maybe a wider rim on the tub there that you could actually sit down on it and swing out instead of trying to lift your leg over a very high tub wall? On the right, this is a much lower tub, but I would really consider here looking at the height also of the overflow, because that overflow is going to give you the depth of the water you're going to be sitting in. And some tubs are going to have as little as 12 inches of water that you'll be bathing in, and that's a very uncomfortable height for water if you're wanting to enjoy a bath. So I would say don't look at just the overall height of the tub, but also remember that height to the overflow, which is going to give you the water depth of the tub. Now, unlike your faucets for the sink area, your overflow and drain is not specified with your tub filler. This needs to be specific to the type of tub you're going to use. And you should always, or I would at least recommend that you purchase the overflow and drain, or what's often called the waste and overflow, with the tub, and purchase that from the tub manufacturer as well, because that is going to fit exactly to that tub and be made specifically for it. So there are many, many different ways the waste and overflow can work on tubs, and you do want to be careful about how this is specified. All right, Moving on to our last fixture area, which is shower enclosures, and I realize I'm sort of going quickly through this. The reason is because we still have our fittings to get to. So shower enclosures are a really neat area because these have become a focal point of the bathroom over the last 10 to 15 years. You have many types of bases that can be used here, from your different acrylic pans to a mud base to a lead pan over on the right, depending on if you want a pre-finished pan or something where you're going to be installing tile or a mosaic maybe on the floor of that shower. And knowing if you are doing that, that shower pan layers have to be built up, and they have to be built up by your tile installer. It's important to know these different layers here and how they work. Of course, there are many more than this. This is just 6 of the basic layers. But the important thing here is that you are going to need to pitch to your drain. Shower curbs are an important consideration because those can end up being something that the installer, without specific instruction, might build a little bit bigger or smaller than you intend, might be a little bit higher. So definitely specify out how the shower curb is going to work and what is going to go on top of it. Water testing is very, very important with any pans that are being built up or layers that are being built to make sure that these last overnight and that it is tested overnight. Certainly this is one of the most expensive areas to go back and replace if you have to do so afterwards. And how you finish these curbs and finish out the area, there are many different options, whether you use the same type of material that's installed in the bathroom and on the walls and floors, or a different type of material. One of my favorite options for showers is this curbless shower option, often referred to as a roll-in type. It's a great choice for age-in-place design and build, for elder care situations, and for just the general visual of more of an open concept room or a wet area or wet room. So now we're getting into the fittings for each of these areas. So let's talk about what provides the water and what you have to consider not only with those items, but how they interact with your fixtures. So here we have some different handle types, and you can choose different handle types for your faucets. So that's an aesthetic decision, and maybe a decision that your client will want to choose, maybe lever handles because they want something ADA compliant, or maybe a specialty type handle because it's more aesthetically appealing to them. But the different sizes here are going to be very, very important. And the word you need to know is the spread of the faucet, and that is going to be from the center of the hot to the center of the cold. Now, a center set faucet is going to be something that is a 4-inch spread and is usually installed on these pre-drilled, more budget-friendly type of options for sinks. You'll see there the one on the left has those pre-drilled holes. The holes are at a 4-inch spread, which means from the hot and the cold, there's 4 inches in between those, and the faucet to use would be one that is like in the middle. Now, a way you can, a sort of a trick you can get away with in specifying this with a 1-hole faucet would be to buy a escutcheon plate. And I did this on my kitchen faucet where I replaced the old 3-hole style with a 1-hole faucet, and I simply bought an escutcheon plate that would work, and it covered those additional holes. So that is something that you consider if you wanted a different type of look for a center spread faucet. Now, widespread faucets are going to be the type of faucets that are going to spread from a much wider dimension, and they're usually going to have a little bit of play. So here you'll see a sink on the left where it is specified for an 8-inch spread. But often you will find that widespread faucets can handle a range from maybe it's 8 to 12 inches or 7 to 9 inches. And you'll want to know that the faucet you choose has the ability to meet the spread of a pre-drilled sink. Here you'll see an example of that and how that fits onto a pedestal sink. Now, when you have a sink that's going to have a countertop on it that may be made out of stone or another slab material, then that is something where you can start playing around with the spreads and really seeing where you want that spread to be. Maybe if you want it to curve with the back of the bowl that's on there, so you can then provide a little bit more control over the decision that is being made on the faucet and how that's laid out. And of course, a very popular choice these days is the single hole faucet. These do differ in how they're controlled, whether you pull out or sideways, front or back for the volume control of the faucet, and how you also control the temperature. Now, something to be careful of with single hole faucets especially is if you're using a faucet with a vessel sink, consider how the handle of that faucet is going to affect the use. So here you'll see a faucet in the center that has a handle on the side, but that would not work well with our vessel sink picture on the left. We need a handle on the top so we can easily control the temperature and the volume without having to reach over behind the sink to an uncomfortable position. So making sure that a handle on top of the spout or even a wall mount faucet is used when you're using a vessel sink is a big consideration. And speaking of wall mount faucets, these have become so popular over the last 10 to 15 years because of their ability to give you a little bit more counter space, a little bit more cleanliness to the sink area. You can see here both two-hole, we're including the spout and the handles as holes here, so a two-hole option and a three-hole option. Now, something to watch out for that we haven't talked about yet are medicine cabinets. Now, if you are doing a medicine cabinet, whether it is a flush mount or a wall mount like you see here, or even an inset medicine cabinet where you're going to have the door swinging open, consider the height of your faucet and how that's going to work for the comfort, for the play of a top handle, for any interference with anything above, such as a medicine cabinet or even a shelf you may install there. All right, let's look next at tub fillers. So with tub fillers, I like to think of these as big faucets. The biggest difference between a tub filler and a faucet for the sink, or really any other fitting in the bathroom, is a tub filler does not have a flow restrictor. Tub filler is going to fill up the tub as fast as possible, so there is no requirements or code for restrictors or any type of water measurement in a tub filler. You have a lot of options on these, and we're going to look at each of those, and sometimes they depend upon the tub or the style or the way it is installed. So wall mount spouts are probably one of the most popular options, especially if your tub is going to be against a wall. And these can be as simple as a spout with a hot and cold handle on each side to something a little bit more modern that maybe has one handle to control or doesn't even have a spout, but more of a water stream, as you see there in the top middle image. Now, wall mount spouts can also be exposed systems, and exposed systems really mean that what you're seeing, the water mix that's happening between the hot and cold handle, the spout, and the hand shower is all on this side of the wall. It's not happening in the copper pipes behind the wall. It's happening on the outside of the wall. It's beautiful. It's plated. It's finished. It gives you a really elegant look. And these type of wall mount faucets have become very, very popular. Usually they will include the hand spray, and that's a very, very nice option for bathroom. If you're not going with wall mount and you're going with deck mount tub fillers, these can also be in the version of concealed or exposed, as you see here. Now, if you're using a concealed tub filler, those could be on an overmount tub, like on the right, where they're just installed right through the tub rim there, or through the slab and the tub rim that's underneath that. Please, please make sure if you are specifying a tub filler for a tub that's going to have a slab on top of it, that the thickness of that slab plus the thickness of the tub lip underneath of it does not exceed the allowable maximum clearance for your spout and handle controls. They are going to have a clearance there that cannot be exceeded by usually about 2 inches. Depends on the manufacturer, but what looks good to me here is this looks like maybe a 3/4 inch, 2 cm slab, which is going to be probably quite all right with the thinner acrylic underneath of it. Now, if you're not going off the deck, you're not going off the wall, then you're going to have to fill up this tub from a tub mount filler, and or excuse me, a floor mount tub filler. And floor mount tub fillers have become really, really popular because you have the ability here to go very modern with just a very sleek pipe that comes up in a specific design, like the one you see on the top left, or a more traditional look like the middle picture, where we have that exposed tub filler that looks so traditional, but we're using freestanding legs with that. So lots of options with that, and these look especially beautiful when you're locating the tub off the wall and maybe out in the center or set out a couple feet from the wall in the room and more as a focal piece. One thing I will caution you on with some tubs that are pre-drilled for faucets, and especially as people love to look for vintage tubs like this one here, is where the location of the holes are for the tub fillers. The one on the left you see here without any fittings on it, those two holes in the top rim of that tub would be to code in most places because you would be taking your tub filler off the deck of the tub, but the tub on the right, that tub most likely would not be to code in a lot of areas because the supply lines are in the tub wall. There is possibility without that tall gooseneck there, which thank goodness they used, but there's possibility that the water from the tub filler could be contaminated with a splash up or with contact to the water that's in the tub, which is considered contamination and would not pass code. So just a tip there to be considerate and thoughtful when looking at vintage tubs and if those tubs would be allowable for use in the locality that you're installing. So here are a few notes for tubs, which you can see here, and we've talked about most of these. All right, next to the last area, which is going to be shower fittings, and this is one of the areas where you can get so creative and I think really let your genius show and have a lot of options that will give your client the look, the feel, and the performance that they want. Now, nowadays, shower systems are usually divided into two groups because we need to control systems with anti-scald devices and make sure that they pass code. So we have two typical systems that are offered these days. Pressure balance systems, which many of us are used to, that handle that you're turning on the water, passing through the cold, getting to the hot, and you move the handle around till you set it at the temperature you like. And then a thermostatic system where you have a main handle that controls the temperature, but then you have separate handles that turn the items, or I should say the outlets of water like a shower head on and off. And you can see the pros and cons, as we could say, between the two here. So pressure balance systems, these will usually, or I should say will always use a diverter to send water from one to the other. So meaning from a shower head to a hand shower, those will need to be used by a diverter because when you turn that pressure balance on, it's on. So no one outlet can be used at one time. There are some systems out there where you can sort of go in the middle of the diverter and it will share the water stream. Sometimes those work okay. Other times they're delivering less water to each outlet. So we like to say, if you're looking for a system where budget is important, where the client doesn't really care about having two different outlets on at the same time, a pressure balance system may be the way to go. Here you'll see the pressure balance valve. That and all valves for the shower are usually going to be the first items installed. And you do want to remember that you not only get all the valves, but any shower drains shipped early. You want to make sure those are there and ready for the plumbers to install during the rough-in phase and during the framing where they've got the access there and can locate those items exactly where you specify and where you want them on the walls. Now, our newer approach, which is an exposed valve, is a good choice. I think plumbers love this because they're not in the wall. They're really just there installing the hot and the cold to this. No valve goes in the wall. And then they're installing that shower head pipe up at the top. And these are a great choice for those hard-to-access walls or if you're going with something that is going to be a remodel or a replacement for other types of items where this might be a good option. Now, thermostatic showers, these are the areas or the showers where you can definitely have that luxury shower experience. I like to call them the car wash possibility because you can have a lot of items on here. Usually these valves are going to be much larger in capacity than a pressure balance valve, sometimes up to 15 gallons per minute. So you can think about how many fittings you could actually install off of that one valve. So here's where you can have body sprays on at the same time. Maybe someone wants 3 shower heads on at the same time, like Mommy Dearest, for those of you old enough like me to remember the movie. So when you want multiple items on at the same time, a thermostatic shower is the way to go. Now, this requires more metal on the walls. I don't think these are the most beautiful pictures, but they do represent the amount of water that can come out. and different layouts that you can have on the wall. So if a client is looking for a way to set up a shower system where they can really get a luxury shower experience and turn on different items, maybe depending on their mood or their needs, a thermostatic system will be the way to go for that. And here you can see a couple additional layout options for this. And one thing to remember is, yes, it is much more metal on the wall, but it does give the user much more control over their shower experience. So we want to end with this picture, which I started with, to hopefully have you view it in a little bit of a different way now, which is seeing the fixtures and the fittings and the considerations that were taken to complete this bathroom, so that not only performed well for the client, it not only was easy to use for how they wanted it to be used, but it was visually appealing, and the specification all looks like it was intentional and nothing was left to chance. So our goal here is to really hope that you leave thinking about the bathroom in a different way, some considerations that you may have for the bath.